Hey, good evening, everyone. Yeah, they call me Dr. Shin, but you guys can just call me Shin. I'm not sure why people put in the additional title there, but yeah, Shin will do. I'm here today to introduce FunctionX, but really today's topic is more about DeFi. And so I will explain why I'm talking about FunctionX, because FunctionX is a blockchain technology, which on top of that we have built a DEX called MarginX. So bear with me, I'll slowly move towards there. So first and foremost, let me explain what FunctionX is. Yes, so FunctionX is actually a next-gen asset offering. Some of you here might have heard MarginX before. For those of you who haven't, all these things will come together and makes a lot of sense. FunctionX is actually an L1 Cosmos SDK-based blockchain founded by MarginX in the year 2018. So the concept and the white paper was launched back then in 2018. 2019, the FX token was launched, and 2021, mainnet and FX wallet was launched. Now, it's important to know that FX began as sort of a tool to support MarginX. But we see that there's a lot of synergy between FunctionX as a blockchain, as an L1 blockchain on Cosmos. We see that there's actually a lot of synergy where we can build a lot of DeFi technologies on top of it, which is why later part of my presentation I'll say that why on top of FunctionX we have actually built a DEX called MarginX. But it's also very important to know FunctionX because that underpins the functionality and the performance of our DEX, which is what we call it MarginX. For those of you who haven't heard of MarginX before, let me very quickly explain what MarginX is. MarginX is one of the, this is, by the way, what you see here is what we call Expos. It's a blockchain-based point of sale device that supports NFC and QR transactions. So the gist of it is you guys can imagine if you want to go and buy a cup of coffee, you would pay with your Visa payment card and things like that. But instead of paying with Visa or MasterCard, you can actually pay with a card that pays through crypto, or using an app, you can actually pay using a crypto. Right? So this is basically a point of sale device that MarginX has built. And again, the FunctionX is what makes this possible. Right? So this is one of the things that we have built on top of FunctionX. And here's also more examples things that we have built on FunctionX. I'm not going to go too much on this because the key point is about MarginX. Again, the point of me making this all these things is I want you to understand the history of how we have arrived at our DEX eventually. Very quickly, I also want to show you that this is the wallet that we have built on top of FunctionX. And this is important because to access our decentralized exchange, you actually have to go through this wallet. So you have to go through this wallet, you have to transfer your money cross-bridge to this FX wallet. And then from here onwards, you can actually access our decentralized exchange called MarginX. Now, I want to zip through all these benefits of FunctionX and go to talk about MarginX, which is basically the main topic today. We are here to talk about DeFi. And MarginX is a perpetual DEX built on top of FunctionX. So we have the interoperability with Cosmos. We are part of the Cosmos family. That's one of our advantages. That also means that we have certain other advantages. For example, we have this multi-chain architecture. And later you can see that why this is very important. Because for those of you who are familiar with DEX and SEX, one of the main limitations between decentralized exchange and centralized exchange is probably the throughput, right? And in a multi-chain architecture, there's some way to circumvent this problem, because essentially with a multi-chain architecture, you can actually distribute the throughput, and which then basically means you can do some of the load balancing, which is how you can ensure that in the event that you want to scale your exchange, your throughput doesn't get affected because there's balance, there's load balancing. So this is one of the advantages of why we want to build our DEX on top of this MarginX L1 blockchain. Just to let you guys show you this website, this is actually already live, so you guys can actually go to our website called marginx.io, and this is already live, you can trade, and you can try your first-hand experience to see what is it like to trade on MarginX. As I was mentioning, there's a difference between centralized exchange and decentralized exchange. I think the previous speakers mentioned it quite well. For those of you who are not familiar, he emphasized the fact that there was a 0.83 seconds of blockchain time. For those of you who are not familiar with trading, you would then realize that that's a very important statement, right? Because in trading, we want to be able to instantaneously trade. The moment I want to buy an asset, I will get that asset, and that order gets settled, gets processed, and I get my asset, or I get paid, or whatever, right? But the problem is, most of this can be done very efficiently on sexes such as finance. Mainly because everything goes to the intermediary, right? Essentially what that means is that if you buy something on Binance, you don't really buy it. Right? I don't know whether the audience here knows this, but just in case you don't know, if you buy a Bitcoin on Binance, you don't really buy a Bitcoin, right? The Bitcoin circulates around the Binance network. You don't really own the Bitcoin. Binance owns the Bitcoin. So if Binance goes bust, which is what happens to FTX, all your Bitcoin is gone, right? That's what leads us to saying that why we need some DEX. Because in DEXs, it's a peer-to-peer transaction, which means that if I buy a Bitcoin or if I do any transaction, it is between me and the person who wants to buy it and the other person who actually wants to sell it. The problem with that is that, yes, you get this transparency in DEXs, but the problem with that is that there is a problem with speed. If you do it on a DEX, which means that every transaction has to be verified by the validators, go through that proof of work or what else, depending on what kind of technology and architecture you're using, and there is a lagging time. And the last thing you want in a trading world is a lag time. So what Thomas mentioned earlier about having achieved 0.83 seconds of block time, that is actually quite significant. I would go on further to say that Thomas already mentioned they were the fastest, right? So I couldn't claim the same thing. So no, we are not at 0.83, but we are quite close. You might think it's quite long, but actually for DEX it's quite fast. We're at about 2 seconds. So we are not that bad. If you look at it, for DEXs, we are quite good. I just want to say this slide here is that if you go out and ask a lot of people, they will say that, we are DEX. I'm really glad that Thomas did that presentation earlier because he opened up for me that their order book is on chain. Our order book is on chain as well. But what I wanted to say is that especially if SFF is around the corner, especially if you go to SFF, a lot of people will say that we are a DEX. But the problem is in an exchange there are many, many different components, right? And more often than not, what happens you see these days is that any company or organization or project, they will just decentralize one single component, and then they'll say that, yep, we are a DEX, right? In fact, you might see that a lot of the projects say that we allow peer-to-peer transfer of money, yep, call us a DEX. But at MarginX, we don't really believe in that. We try to be as close as possible to Satoshi's visions, if you will. We try to decentralize every possible aspect that we can have on the DEX, right? So for example, the first one, the first question is that does it directly mediate the transfer of value? If the answer is yes, it's a DEX. If no, then I take it with a pinch of salt. The second question is the settlement done on blockchain, right? That's the second question we have to ask. And can assets be unilaterally moved by third party? And is there a centralized governance? And for MarginX, all of this is done on the blockchain. So the order book, the settlement, everything, even the governance is done in a decentralized way. And this is why we are kind of proud to say that, at MarginX, we try to build something that's as decentralized as possible. We try to appeal to the community who believes that decentralized is the way forward. Again, I say things, I try to be as neutral as possible. There are advantages of having certain things centralized. Certain things get done more efficiently, but that also means it is less transparent. So I give you one good example. If you guys do a lot of trading, very often than not, you will notice some weird movements of price sometimes, right? Out of nowhere, just before you want to buy, someone will just place a huge amount of short order. And that price will just go all the way down, liquidate your position, and come back up again. The problem is in centralized exchange, there's absolutely zero way of you guys knowing who has done that, right? And as someone who has traded quite often, I can tell you, sometimes it's the exchange themselves who's doing that, right? Now the beauty of DEX is that I'm not saying that the exchange can't do it. If they want to do it, you would be able to know, because everything is done on chain. Who placed the order, who made the order, how is it settled, where the price has gone in. So it doesn't guarantee that there's no bad actors in the exchange, because there always will be. But if there is, you will be able to trace that person and to be able to expose that person as, you're the exchange yourself, so why are you doing this? But if you do it on Binance, there's no way of you doing that. And I think that's the whole idea of, this decentralized community that, we are here, right? The main reason why we like cryptos and stuff like that is because we want it to be transparent, right? Like, we're not saying that there will be scams, but if that happens, I know where it went, right? I know this is that person. And that's the whole idea behind our MarginX platform here. So as I mentioned, we have on-chain order matching, on-chain fund settlement mechanism. We have no custodial wallets. We have non-custodial wallets. And we have collective governance. I just want to expand a little bit on this collective governance, which basically means that we actually want to decentralize or democratize the decision making, such as, for example, if sufficient enough of our communities wants to trade a certain pair. Like, I don't really want to trade Pepe because I think it's just a lot of a hype coin. But if the company comes in and they can do this through collective governance and say that, I think this is something that everyone within our community is playing right now, and we can't trade this, we can't short this coin anywhere else. Can you do this for us, right? And if sufficient votes goes through, it gets done, right? And again, this is not something that I think a lot of DEXs offer to the community right now. And we are going to take it to another step further down. I'm not sure why this slide here, I think this is a bit off. But we can talk more about this if you guys want to know why it's important to have perpetuals, but I guess it's a bit irrelevant right now. We'll talk more about the solution that we have. As I mentioned earlier, we have a multi-chain solution. So for each of our trading pair, for example, if you have Bitcoin, or for example, this is our native coin for function X with FX, or let's say our community votes to have a Tesla coin, Tesla shares, we can actually create derivatives for that, and so on and so forth. And each of these trading pair can be a chain by itself, and because of this multi-chain architecture, we can do it at maximum throughput without having a worry that if the volume gets too high, it slows down. So this is one of the things that you guys have to be careful of if you are playing with DEXs, because a lot of the volumes in DEXs are quite low right now. Even, I don't know whether I can name them, but even the popular ones, right? The volume is not as high as what you guys think. But the problem is, and DeFi is not exactly at its all-time high at this moment, right? We all know that. Now, when the bull run comes in, when the DeFi is at an all-time high, when the volume comes in, you have to be careful, especially for those that doesn't have a mitigation way like us, where they have a multi-chain architecture. Congestion will start to come in, and you would expect that even though some may claim that their speed is quite fast, but as volume comes in, at the most critical point of time when the Feds announce something and you want to buy something, you wouldn't be able to do so because it just gets congested. So that is something that you want to be careful of, and just want to assure you that in MarginX we can mitigate that through this multi-chain architecture that we have. And as far as we know, we are probably the only one, maybe one of the few that actually uses this for our DEX. So earlier I mentioned that we have that collective governance. We want to give this freedom to you guys to decide what kind of tokens to list. And in the upcoming next few months, we have Roadmap 2.0. We want to take that one step further. We even want to give you the freedom as a project owner to list your token. So what we realized is that we spoke to a lot of project owners, and they find it that it's very difficult for them to list their tokens because you have to go through a lot of process, a lot of scrutinies if you want to list your tokens on Binance, for example, right? But we believe that every project owner, if they want to, they should be able to own they should be able to list the tokens at least on our exchange perpetual DEX. So we want to give them the freedom, right? And the way we want to do that is through two ways. We want to supercharge their idle assets. And what we mean by that is that, first of all, we want to say that any LP tokens, at the beginning we would do this for maybe the Cosmos ecosystem. So if you have all these LP tokens, what you can do with the LP tokens? What can you do with the LP tokens, right? Most people just take it and farm it. That's about it that you can do. But what we want to say is that we're willing to take your LP tokens as a collateral and give you tokens to actually trade on our DEX. It helps us to create liquidity on our DEX, right? And it makes a lot of sense because LP tokens, in a way itself, is liquidity, right? So we want to supercharge your idle tokens. We're taking your idle tokens, put it into our DEX as a token for you to trade, and as an opportunity for you to put it back into our exchange as liquidity. And we want to give you the freedom to list, sort of like a service, right? So anyone who has a project, who has an idea, who has a token, who has difficulty to list on Binance, for example, has the opportunity to come into our exchange and say that, look, I want to provide $1 million worth of my LP tokens, and I want to have a perpetual listed on MarginX with this amount of liquidity. And we will do that automatically, right? It's not even like you have to go to talk to us and do some paperwork. It will be almost like Uniswap, but a limit order book Uniswap, right? So it's essentially placing liquidity, and we create sort of like a limit order book for you, and you can actually have a perpetual in your name. In order to come up with that, we come up with a lot of formulas here. I'm not going to bore you down with the formulas. I've already talked too long. But just to very quickly let you know that one of the ways we are approaching this is that because we know everyone is familiar with AMM, with the XY equals to K equation. So what we did was we took that equation. But bear in mind that AMM is not a limit order book equation, right? AMM, it's Uniswap's equation. And we have to translate that to become a limit order book. So we take XY equals to K, we transform that into a discretized format where we calculate what kind of spreads, how many orders you should put on the limit order book, and we transform all that thing into something like that, which resemble roughly what a limit order book would look like if you have a certain amount of liquidity. So I just want to end here, but just to very quickly summarize, if there's any takeaway from what I've talked about today, it's just a few things. Number one, MarginX is built on this blockchain called FX, which is L1 on Cosmos. And the whole idea is that it has a multi-chain architecture which ensures throughput, number one. Number two, it actually has all the decentralized components, on-chain settlement, on-chain fund, and so on and so forth. And third of all, I'm very excited to let you know that in our roadmap 2.0, we are going to bring AMM to limit order book. We're going to supercharge your idle LP tokens into liquidity, which you can create your own, you can list your own exchange, list your own pair on our exchange. And that's coming very, very soon. We really hope that you guys will be excited by that. We certainly think that whatever I mentioned here, behind here, I did my best to do the research. I wouldn't say 100%, but 98.75%, I made up that number. But pretty sure that we are probably most likely, if not really, the only one project out there that's offering this service right now. Right? And that's all for me. So, looking forward to any questions later. Thank you.